Oh, I think we may have lost the line to Tony. Are you there, Tony?
Yeah, it's a bad line.
It is, isn't it?
I can't hear you
Can
massively.
you hear me now? Should we hang up and should we turn it off and then turn it on again?
Come back to me on another line.
Okay, we'll turn it off and then turn it on again. That's a very technical approach. And in fact, speaking of technical approaches, would you like to know why dusting the back of your fridge is so important during a time of energy shortages? What I love about this, from James, who describes himself as Sawdusty James, and Paul, is they've both explained it to me, and I'm not sure I'm any clearer than I was before they explained it to me, which is a reflection on my powers of comprehension, not upon their powers of explication. The coils on the back of a fridge, writes James, are part of a heat exchange. The dust insulates it and prevents it working as efficiently. Ah, yeah, I do understand that now I've said it out loud. And I'll have a look at Paul's in a moment. It's Tony back. So, Tony, what's the biggest game changer? The pressure from the White House or the change of personnel in Downing Street?
Well, I think the pressure from the White House is very significant. And I suppose for Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, while she was able to get to be leader of the Conservative Party thanks to the support of the ERG, it's a different matter when you're actually governing and you have the responsibility of dealing with other leaders and other countries. And I think that is partly explains why there seems to be this change of mood. Now, they're not spelling it out entirely, but certainly the way these talks have been set up would suggest that the UK's engagement with the issues is different from what it was before.
They're not spelling it out. I mean, they're almost trying to do it on the down low. There's been no real announcement from Downing Street, not much reference to it, and yet, of course, in Ireland and in the European Union in general, it's an altogether bigger story.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm in Prague at the moment at this EU summit, and the broader meeting that Liz Truss attended yesterday, and the Taoiseach Micheál Martin said, look, we need to give this process a bit of time and space and not to put conditions on it. So I think we are going to go into one of these infamous tunnels where there's not a lot reported on the technical talks and they beaver away. But I mean, the way the talks are structured, they are going to be getting into very deep dive explorations of the customs issue, of the agri-food issue, competition rules, VAT, and these will run in parallel. And then you'll have much more regular interventions at political level between James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, and Maroš Šefčovič, his opposite number on the EU side. So I think that is evidence that there's a new dynamic with these talks. Although, as you say, that the fundamentals are still there, that both sides are very far apart on some of the key issues.
Yes, I mean, it's the willingness to negotiate that possibly is the biggest change. But there's a clock ticking as well, Tony, isn't there? Because is it 3 weeks today that the Northern Ireland Secretary would be obliged to call elections? Be the 28th of October, right.
So, yes, so by the 28th of October, if there's no Northern Ireland Assembly or executive forms, then the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has to call elections. That's under the law. It's very unlikely that a deal will be done before then, and of course the significance there is that the DUP has said they will not form or help to form a Stormont executive if the protocol hasn't been changed or until the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is enacted. So that's obviously not going to happen over the next 3 weeks.
Could there be an outline agreement, or would that be too much to hope for? I've seen some reports that Dublin might have hopes of an outline agreement by the 28th.
Yeah, I mean the way they're doing this is they could start to get agreement on the easier stuff, and then kind of announce that as squared off, and then that starts to create momentum, and then perhaps at a stretch, the DUP could signal a staged return to Stormont. I mean, we'll have to see what way this goes over the coming weeks. One of the key issues, I think, is the data access question. Now, the UK, under the protocol agreement, the UK has promised to provide access to the EU to all the data that on goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. And the UK has built a bespoke system to do that, where there are something like 5 different data processes are conflated into one that the EU officials can access in a very user-friendly way. That's been a bit of a running sore between both sides for nearly 2 years now. But the system is up and running, and it's only there's a few formalities. It's almost ready to go, and I think that could really help with the process, because the more the EU can see in real time or close to real time what's coming in, what are the risks, are there any patterns that suggest some dodgy activity? If you can see that picture clearly, then you can decide to ease off on checks and controls and calibrate it in that way. And I think that'll be a key part of this process.
So we watch with interest. A quick word, if you would, Tony, on the success or otherwise of the non-EU element of the European summit, the 44-country gathering that was in many ways, I think, Emmanuel Macron's brainchild.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it happened, is a bit of a triumph for Emmanuel Macron, getting 44 leaders to come to Prague and to meet. And there were not any major dust-ups, and of course you had that meeting between Liz Truss and Emmanuel Macron, which has gone down quite well. I mean, in general, EU leaders and national capitals do want the UK to engage at a European level on issues of mutual concern, and that really hasn't happened. I mean, there was nothing in the trade and cooperation agreement which gives you institutional architecture for the UK to take part in these kind of forums. Liz Truss came here yesterday and she had a bilateral, and I think it was appreciated that she did turn up, and of course her position on Ukraine as well is appreciated, and she seems to have reached some kind of agreement with Emmanuel Macron on migration, on irregular movements across the English Channel, and on nuclear energy cooperation.
Thank you, Tony. Always a pleasure. Tony Connolly there, live from Prague, where, as you heard, there is both an EU summit and a meeting of the EPC, I think it's called, which is a relatively new grouping of 44 European countries, and therefore more than are in the European Union itself. Britain has unblocked access to key North Sea and European offshore wind projects to help keep the lights on by reducing dependency on gas imports is another story relevant to some of the conversations that we've been having this hour. It's just coming up to 11:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Big debate now about why it's a good idea to dust the coils on the back of your fridge, although I'm happy to tell you that nobody is disputing the advice that it's good to dust the coils on the back of your fridge. They can't release heat as effectively. So a refrigerator is about removing heat. It's not actually about introducing cold. Do you understand that? So the more heat you remove, the colder it gets. Dusty fridge coils can't release the heat as effectively, writes Paul Rowlett. So keeping them clean means the compressor and motor have less work to do, thereby reducing wear and introducing and improving efficiency. We cover it all on this show, don't we? Hey? It is 12 minutes to 12, and it is also, as you know, Global's Make Some Noise Day, our annual drive to raise as much money as we possibly can to help support, well, this year, 100 small charities providing crucial services, food banks, mental health and domestic abuse helplines, carer support, community projects and employment programs. And I asked if on this programme we could pay particular attention to Parenting Mental Health, a charity set up by Suzanne, who we heard from earlier, essentially to help parents who are in the profoundly unenviable position of watching their children suffer, often unspeakably, to the point of contemplating or even attempting suicide, and A, not knowing how to help, which is such a destructive experience, and B, not knowing where to get help for themselves, which is why Suzanne, having been through it herself with her daughter Izzy, decided to set up the charity. I'm joined now by Vix Frisby and Alison Herbert, both parents who have been supported by the charity. We'll start with you, Alison. I know that your daughter's still very poorly, and I'm very sorry to hear that, but the help that the charity has given has been pretty huge, I think.
Yeah, massive. I came to PMH when my daughter had literally just been discharged from a year in hospital, and I didn't know anyone that had experienced anything even similar or even in a smaller version. And people, the stuff that was going on was really traumatic, and people don't know what to say to you, so they stop saying things, and the silence was...
It's like bereavement sometimes, I think. It's as if they don't know what they're going to cross the road to avoid.
Definitely.
Saying the wrong thing or the uncomfort, the discomfort of having to talk to
completely.
you.
And my world just became completely isolated, and I tried some other groups and they just weren't for me. And someone in a comment on another group suggested PMH, and it literally was the turning point, I think, for me on my own personal journey. I came there 2 years ago just completely damaged by the experience, completely traumatised and very alone, scared, and hard to reach, I was told.
Because you put your suit of armour up to protect yourself, I
Yeah,
imagine.
what we'd been through was just horrendous.
Of course.
And I didn't comment to start with. I just watched and observed and saw two people who stood out who I could relate to their experience. And I just thought, oh my God, there's other people out there.
It's not just me.
No. And the relief and it just is such, from the outset, PMH was very different to other groups. It's just this safe, warm, compassionate space with so much lived experience, and there's no judgment, there's no shame or blame, and it's just got a wonderful feel to it that Suzanne has upheld even despite it growing.
It stayed intimate almost. I
Yes,
sense.
yeah. You wouldn't think you were one of 31,500. When someone replies, it's like 1-to-1 in a way. And I just embraced every resource it had. And that was the start of my personal journey. It took a long time, but, I'd begin to comment. I couldn't do a Zoom. I couldn't talk. And I connected with Suzanne one day, and that's the first time I'd ever told someone a bit of our story, and they didn't run away, and she was still there at the end, and I'm just incredibly grateful for that.
And it's flicked a switch inside you as well. You've become a listening. You've gone from not opening your gob at all in the first meetings to being a listening circle facilitator, and now you run the circles that you found so helpful to yourself.
I mean, you just couldn't believe it. I mean, yeah, I was asked to be a moderator. That's to comment, on people's posts, and that was the start of it. Then I was asked to be a listening circle facilitator. Then I kind of helped out, as I put it, and now I kind of oversee it. But I think the biggest turning point was I'd tried to read Suzanne's book, and I just couldn't concentrate because you can't.
No.
And so I got
it's
it on...
hypervigilance, I think, isn't it? It's as if you're like a meerkat. You're constantly wondering where the next hit is going to come from.
So I got it on Audible, and she's got the most soothing voice. I can highly recommend her book on Audible. But from that, I did the Partnering Not Parenting course, which is a massive extension of the book. And I just went for a complete deep dive on myself. And it was just the turning point. One of the sections is on guilt. And after 4 sides of A4 of my guilt over everything, I just thought I need to stop. I could have kept going because you accumulate so much guilt. And actually, being in that space, and particularly on the course, it helps you park or even get rid of what's not yours.
Because carrying it can crush you.
It's heavy. It's heavy, it's hard, it's sad, it's painful. And just the space is just... It's just amazing. It is life-changing for so many. That we hear that so often.
Clearly. I should stress that or remind people that Suzanne Alderson's book, Never Let Go, How to Parent Your Child Through Mental Illness, is a manual on how to navigate these horribly choppy waters. And it can only be written, and I suspect the listening circles can only be run by people who've been on those waters or are still on them.
Yeah, and we do survey feedback, and someone said that actually they found it more helpful than talking to a therapist because they haven't got to explain everything because we already get half of it.
Yeah.
And it's a safe space to be heard and supported and form connections, and that's so difficult when you're isolated at home as a carer.
Yes, it is that loneliness, I think, that parenting mental health sort of addresses first, isn't it? That sense that no one has been through what you've been through.
Absolutely. I think it's really difficult because friends and family don't always understand it, and I think unless you've lived the experience of seeing your child struggling with their mental health, you just can't understand it. I can explain it to people, and I can explain it and articulate it as best I can, but people still, I don't think, really, really understand how challenging it can be and how difficult it is to see your child suffering and be helpless, because all you want to do with your kids is fix everything for them, make everything better.
Of course.
And that's not an option. You can't.
Tell us a little bit about your daughter's decline, if that's the right word, and where you begin to know that this isn't just normal adolescence or normal mood swings. There's something medical going on here.
I think I took a while to realise it, to be honest. When I look back, I think, oh my goodness, if I'd have understood a bit sooner, things may have been a bit easier.
We're back to the guilt, aren't we,
Yeah,
already?
definitely.
Absolutely. And I think because everybody tells you what you should be doing. So you go to school because she didn't want to go to school, and you talk to school about it, and they say, well, almost just force her in. That's the kind of advice you get. And it was
which is the worst possible advice in most cases.
The GP that we went to initially kind of talked her through anxiety and told her that the only way it would get better was if she faced her fear. And actually, that was the absolute wrong thing to do. So I spent so much time probably sticking my head in the sand a little bit, kind of thinking, it'll be all right, it'll get better. This isn't going to last. She'll get over it. It'll all be fine. Just a phase, exactly. And it wasn't just a phase. And gradually, she was withdrawing more and more. And I just got to a point with it where I was just completely lost. My own mental health was suffering. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know where to turn. And I accidentally almost found parenting mental health through another Facebook group that I was involved in. And then I read Suzanne's book. And that was the moment, because I read it and I thought, oh my goodness, I just get this woman. Everything she says, that could be us, that could be me.
She gets you as well.
It was amazing.
The beauty of the whole charity, isn't it?
Yeah.
The beauty of these connections. It is... I often say on the radio programme, there are a few topics about which you know absolutely nothing until you need to know absolutely everything. And
Absolutely.
this is one of them, and it is stunning how little support there is out there, how big the space into which parenting mental health has moved actually is.
Yeah, there's just a lack of specialist support. I think that's been really noticeable. I mean, we're still on a waiting list for CAMHS. We're waiting for the support that we really need, the professional support. We've had real struggles with school, trying to get them on board, trying to get them to understand. And it just feels like every day you're trying to support your child and you want your child to be okay. But on top of that, you're dealing with all these other issues that are kind of being thrown at you because there's so much blame. Everyone from the outside seems to look at you and say, it feels like they're saying,
have you tried
well,
this?
you're the parent.
You should have done
do
that.
this,
it must
do
be
that.
your fault.
Exactly.
Everything from diet through to sleep. And it's a bit, on a tiny level for people struggling to understand the gravity of what we're talking about, something that they will be able to get their heads around. It's a bit like insomnia. When you tell someone you've got insomnia and they think they're going to be able to, have you tried counting sheep or something? No, I've never heard of that. I've never heard it. So everyone, they mean well, Alison, but they've no idea. They've no idea at all. How did you find the charity yourself?
Literally through another Facebook group. It was an American one, and I joined after the PMH got charity status,
Right.
but heavily involved now on the volunteering side. And I would literally just, if anyone's struggling with their child of any age, it can be an adult child as well, there's no situation that's too big or small, and it's valid, so please join, because there is some support out there, and it can help.
And again, even if it is simply diluting the loneliness, diluting the guilt, then that's a
the
job
main
well
thing.
done.
It's those connections. You make connections, and you feel validated, and you feel listened to, and that's been probably the most important thing for me. And everybody is just so compassionate. Everybody is so willing to put themselves out there, willing to help, willing to support. I mean, Alison herself, she's amazing. I've put posts out at very inconvenient times of the day, and she comes back. She's always got something supportive to say. It's amazing.
Never alone.
No,
Never
and
alone.
If people are, dubious about sharing online or worried, it is a private group. Nobody outside the group can see, but also we have an option to post anonymously, which is heavily used in our group, and it's such a valuable extra for those that are just a bit unsure.
A little bit like you were.
But can still get that support.
A bit reticent.
Yeah.
A bit quiet. Thank you,
Thank
Alison.
you.
Thank you, Vic. So I'm going to give it the full Monty now. You'll understand that it's not
Thank
just the
you.
tax donations, but the more money we raise, the more money makes its way to our charities. And in the case of parenting mental health, the money will be used to train more volunteers to do precisely the work that Vix and Alison have been describing to us. That there are two ways you can do this. You can call the LBC studio line on 0345 6060 973 and then press option 2 to make a donation and make a difference to charities like parenting mental health. And there is obviously you can donate however little or much that you want by doing that. That's 0345 6060 and press option 2. Alternatively, you can do it in a straightforward text. You can donate £10, £20, £30 or £40 by texting LBC10, LBC20, LBC30 or LBC40, no space, to 70766. That's LBC10, LBC20, LBC30 or LBC40 to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only, please. Seek the bill player's permission. Standard network charges may apply, and terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com. This is a fantastic charity, and you're both fantastic people. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you
time.
so much. Thank you for listening.
It's 12:01.
Today, all of Global comes together for Global's Make Some Noise Day, supporting small charities that need your help more than ever. Global's Make Some Noise Day on LBC.
And one of the small charities Global's Make Some Noise is supporting this year is Bromley Brighter Beginnings, based in South London. It's a volunteer-run charity that helps vulnerable families living in poverty. They provide essential items such as beds, cots, high chairs, buggies, clothes and shoes for children and their families. And if you need any further encouragement to donate today, just imagine, think back to when your children were tiny, and imagine not having enough money to buy beds, cots, high chairs, buggies, clothes or shoes for them. Their campaign, A Bed for Every Child, will provide beds, mattresses and bedding for children living in poverty. To donate £10, £20 or £30, text LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30 without a space to 70766. That's LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30 without a space to 70766. And I notice a couple of people have texted to the studio number, the usual number for texts. That won't go anywhere. That won't involve any donation whatsoever. So do it again, this time to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. 16 and over only, please. Seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges may apply, and the full terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 6 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. This is by popular request, this next topic. Quite a few people have been asking me to talk about this for the last couple of weeks. Well, since that so-called mini-budget, really, which tanked the pound and sent interest rates skyrocketing. But don't talk the country down. Don't be part of the anti-greed coalition by reflecting upon reality and reporting upon the truth. I've got a couple of other things to deal with this hour. I want to play you a bit of my full disclosure interview with the Don himself, David Dimbleby. I mean, quite daunting, really, for an interviewer to interview David Dimbleby, although it was such a delightful experience. Apart from, I think, the very first thing I said to him, he rejected and objected to. So from the very beginning of that interview, it was clear that I was going to have to stay on my toes. But my goodness me, it's good to have heroes. They say you should never meet your heroes. I disagree. I've met a few of my heroes over the years, and I've hardly ever been disappointed by the experience. I certainly wasn't with this. And to hear him talk about the night that he announced the referendum result, I mean, quite remarkable, epochal. Imagine that, being right there. And the process they go through in deciding whether or not they're going to go yet. What point can you say that is it now? It is definitely over. The numbers can't come back. It was, I've been just riveting. I could have listened to him all day. And he might be delighted to learn. I don't say much in the interview. It's one of those interviews where really my hand is barely on the tiller. I just have to sort of occasionally remind him of my presence or steer him back towards the story of his life and times. I'm really proud of it, and it was an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoy it too. I'll give you a little taster of it shortly. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. But I want to talk about mortgages. And I just want to know what's happening, really. I want to know how the interest rate rises, how the fears of the banks. They're calling upon the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, to extend a mortgage guarantee scheme because there are fears that high interest rates could cut first-time buyers out of the housing market. But what I want to do is keep it really, really tight on this. So I'm looking in the first instance to talk to you if your life got turned upside down in the last fortnight. So whether you were looking to renew a mortgage you already had, and you were on, somewhere around the 1% mark, between 1% and 2%, and suddenly your new one is going to be 5 times that. I just want to know what it is all going to mean. I have enormous sympathy for you. You know I do. And there's nothing I can do to help, really. But I don't know that the rest of us have got a full picture of just how disruptive this is going to be. The Evening Standard got around to it, I think, yesterday or the day before, and they actually talked about sort of wrecking dreams. This is one of the things that I'm always conscious of on the programme, in the difference between a life story and a news story. And sometimes we all make the mistake, well, actually, that may not be true, but I definitely make the mistake of forgetting about the life stories that lie behind the news story. So we can talk in abstract terms about numbers, about percentages, about interest rates. But for the people who saw those interest rates go up at the worst imaginable time for them, this particular chapter of economic history is going to make very, very grim reading. And I want you to share it with us. So in other words, you were looking to renew or you were looking to get your first mortgage a month ago. You didn't sign on the dotted line. You didn't get it all cleared up. How disrupted has your life been? How much of a difference to your future has Kwasi Kwarteng's abominable mini-budget made? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And whether or not you're now not moving house, whether or not you're staying in rent, whether or not you're going to be absolutely kebabbed, you don't know how you're going to... I just want to know all of it. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And I do want to hear about the numbers. You thought you were going to be paying X, but you're actually going to be paying X times 1,000. All of that, anything. And you may not be comfortable talking about it yet, so feel free to tell me about your kids. You thought that your daughter was going to be getting her first property, and now, well, she isn't, because this has been such a huge and utterly unpredicted impact. And that, we'll allow a moment of politics, that's when I get cross or upset, because they're so blasé about it all. They're so cash about it all, claiming that they got rid of the tax cut for the highest earners, people like me, because it was a distraction rather than because the head of the 1922 committee told Liz Truss she was never going to get it through the House of Commons. Kwasi Kwarteng trying to make light of it, going on a round of interviews after the disastrous mini-budget tanked the pound, telling everybody, most obviously the markets, that there was going to be more of the same on the way. And then lo and behold, the pound fell further. The IMF coming out and saying, this is not right, this is really dodge. And them refusing to change course. The Bank of England having to intervene to the tune of millions and millions of pounds just to steady the ship, just to get the pound back on an even keel. And yet they stood up in Birmingham and claimed they were definitely doing the right thing. Nobody agrees. Even the historian who Liz Truss cites as one of the key inspirations for her economic policies, has gone public with the fact that she doesn't understand his economic policies. He's described himself as being absolutely staggered at the stuff she said. So his mind has been blown by the idea that she could have read his book and come away with the ideas that she's come away with. I don't think we can stress that last point enough. This is an astonishing intervention by an American academic. Imagine if I came out and said to you, "Oh, I'll tell you what, that fella over there, Johnny McJohnnyface, he is a brilliant economist, and I'm going to build my entire attitude to economics on this book that I've just read that he wrote." And then Johnny McJohnnyface came on the line. I said, "Who's that online too?" "Hello, James, it's Johnny McJohnnyface here. I just want to say you've completely misunderstood my book. I'm glad you're only a radio presenter and not a politician or, God forbid, a prime minister or a president, because your understanding of what I actually wrote is beyond stupid. It has blown my mind how far from what I wrote you seem to have ended up." That's happened to our prime minister in the first month in office, at a time when the economic impact of the so-called mini-budget continues to reverberate around the nation. So there's a lot going on here, and that's why sometimes, perhaps, we step away or we lose sight of the finer detail, the life story behind the news story. And I just want to know what's happened to you. I want to know what sort of bombshell was dropped upon your property-owning dreams or your property intentions or your lives, your futures, your idea of where the future would be, by this announcement and by the continuing impact that it's had upon mortgage rates. The Many banks have increased the interest rate stress tests they apply to see if borrowers can afford to repay a mortgage to about 8%. The government has conducted its own modelling of the effects of interest rate rises on the housing market and homeowners' abilities to service their mortgages in conjunction with lenders. The banks are meeting with the Chancellor in the hope of seeing some form of guarantee scheme put in place so that lenders won't be left up the Swanee when lending to first-time buyers who then struggle to make their payments. It's pretty grim, this stuff, I think, but I want the detail. I want the personal experiences. Listen, we all know that the plural of anecdote is not data, but these individual stories are all real, and they will all help us to paint a rather more accurate picture of what is really going on, while the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister continue to insist that everything is going swimmingly. That's the crux of it all. Everything's going brilliantly, they say, while you watch your dreams of moving house or even getting onto the property ladder either disappear over the horizon or circle the plug hole. The number you need, 0345 6060 973. It's 12:15. 12:17 is the time. How has it hit you? The government, the Conservative Party conference, the Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer insisted essentially that everything was going swimmingly. But that impact on interest rates of the so-called mini-budget will have turned people's lives upside down, and we're going to talk to as many as we can. Tom's in Portsmouth. Tom, what's going on? Oh, we'll try and sort that phone line out, Tom. I don't know what's happened there, but we will definitely come back to you, I promise. David is in Southsea. David, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I've spoken to you previously about the housing situation that myself and my partner are in. Essentially, we're both looking at moving closer to her parents. We've got work there. Neither of us can actually afford anything it's in Wiltshire. We can't really afford anything there. So the plan was to build. That was all based on the fact that so my granddad unfortunately passed away earlier this year, and we're in the process of actually selling his house.
Okay.
So all of the money's locked up within the sale of this house, which is now, due to the current mortgage situation, has fallen through.
So the sale has fallen through. You had a buyer and they can't press ahead because their mortgage... Oh, lorks.
So essentially we're now locked in the cycle where obviously people are not being able to get mortgages. The rates are ridiculous. We're then trapped in the cycle of rent. So we're then... money that we were saving up to go onto this project is now going back into rent. It's just an endless cycle. It made my blood absolutely boil when Liz Truss said in her speech that we're getting first-time buyers onto the ladder.
Yes. But
we're a first-time buyer and we're not getting onto the ladder because of the decisions that they've made.
I mean, specifically, they have done this to you. They have pulled the metaphorical rug from under your feet. What does the estate agent say about the likelihood of another buyer coming forward? And I mean, they have to be quite upbeat, don't they? But
they are quite positive.
Good.
It's. I think it's all obviously dependent. They don't really have as long.
Have we lost that line? Are you still there?
Yeah,
God, I'm getting bad. It's two phone lines now that have conspired upon me, David. I think yours is coming back into.
Hello.
Yeah, that's better. So what are you going to do then? Just keep your fingers crossed, but all the time you're sitting. And have you found a house to move to in Wiltshire? Because you're going to lose that. No, you haven't yet.
So we're building on land. It's the only way that we can actually afford. We've been lucky enough to be gifted some land.
Gosh.
So. But with a self-build mortgage, we're applicable for it. But that's even higher rates because the banks and loaners see it as a greater risk.
Yes, of course.
So our rates are going to be even higher. So that's going to be an interesting one to come to you when it eventually comes round. So we're just kind of...
Well, good luck. I mean, as I said, I knew this was going to happen. I said at the outset, I'll find this frustrating because there's absolutely nothing I can do except get the stories out there. Just a quick word on how you feel. Rory Bremner's been quite strong on this. He says, so you sack a highly respected and experienced official, reject advice, dismiss warnings, refuse the OBR's offer of help. Your cocksure mini-budget then causes a major crisis, placing the pensions industry in peril. Your actions add hundreds of pounds more to people's mortgages. What do you say? I'm sorry, I resign, or what a day? How is Kwasi Kwarteng still in his job? Why do we even put up with this appalling behaviour? I mean, you clearly feel that the politicians, that the government, that the Chancellor has literally done this to you.
Yes. Yeah, it was just, let down is an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed it is. And that uncertainty, the best thing you can have, three of the best things you can have in life are certainty, hope and chances, or choices rather. Certainty, hope and choices. And money can buy you some of those things, a degree of certainty, a degree of hope and a multiplicity of choices. The Chancellor's taken them all away from David. Let's try Tom in Portsmouth again. Tom, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I just heard, obviously, what you said recently just happened to myself. So I run my own business as an electrical contractor.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get a mortgage for the past sort of 6 years. And finally, after a lot of saving and to and fro and getting kind of back on my feet after COVID,
Yes.
I've seen people are now having to sort of refrain from spending, having work done in their properties and jobs like that.
Tom, I'm sorry, mate. I do want to hear it, but the phone line just isn't good enough. And I know that we'd kind of made sure it was clear before you came back on. I can only apologise. We'll try and get it up, but it's not. That's 2 for 2 now. Max is in Bournemouth. Max, what would you like to say?
Hey there, James. So, we bought a house in November 2 years ago.
Yes.
Put ourselves on a 2-year fix, and that was when the rates were an all-time low.
Yes.
So now regretting that we didn't put it on a 5-year.
Sure.
So that's up in 2 months, and it's looking like it's going to go up to over £750 a month more on top of what we're paying at the moment.
Good grief. That's huge.
Yeah.
And that's
So
after
it's,
tax. That's money you've got after tax, isn't it? I know you know that. I just wondered whether he knew that.
Yeah, so it basically means I'm not in a situation where I think I can afford it. I think I can, but it means that if I lock myself in for 2 years, that's an extra 2 years of paying an extra 750. So don't know whether to go on to a one of those monthly flex ones, but that could then go even higher than that. So it's a strange time.
So you've been on the blower, have you, to your mortgage broker, or saying what are my options going to be in 2 months' time, and the best option you've got is £750 a month more than what you're currently paying, which is going to wipe out most people. But you're very lucky. I know you acknowledge that you're lucky to be in a position where you can probably absorb this, although not forever.
Yes,
not forever.
Well, maybe not. No. So I might have to sell my car. We've booked a holiday that we rescheduled because we weren't able to go on it due to COVID. So we're still saving up for the hotels and stuff for that now. So I don't know if we can do that. So it is quite stressful. But I just wasn't expecting it to go up that much. I was kind of budgeting around the £400 mark, but £750.
No, it's big. It's extremely big. And again, I'm going to ask everyone this. You don't have to answer it, but the site of the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Birmingham this week essentially insisting that everything's going swimmingly and they've made all the right choices.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that at all. I mean, look, what's going to happen is people aren't going to be buying houses because they can't afford the mortgages, and then people aren't going to be selling their houses, and then what's going to happen?
Well, and that's the question, isn't it? This is where the kind of optimism or the unicornism, the magical thinking of it all is genuinely baffling. You've got the banks beating a path to his door. They've done a U-turn on the OBR. They've abolished one of the tax cuts that they were going to introduce. It's very hard to escape the conclusion that they haven't actually got the first idea what they're doing, any of them. And that we're a bit like the conversation about flipping energy public information. They think it's an ideology, but it's actually just a sort of whole balloon of idiocy.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I wish you well. I mean, everyone is thinking two things now. They're either thinking if they're lucky enough to earn a fair old whack, they think, could we do £750 a month if we absolutely had to? Or they're thinking, crikey, how can anyone pay £750 a month and more for their mortgage than they're currently paying? It's unbelievable. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you, Max. Natalie's in Chingford. Natalie, what's going on?
Hey, James.
Hey.
Exactly the same as your previous caller. Our mortgage has gone up by £795 a month starting from the 1st of November. We were selling the house. We had the house on the market. We were moving from Chingford out towards Bishop's Stortford.
Right.
And our mortgage was on a portable.
Yeah.
So we thought perhaps we'd be able to port the mortgage. And then when we realised that it was actually up for renewal, it went up to 4.1%. So it's an extra £795.
Every month?
Every month,
Just to stay where you are when you thought you were going to be moving?
Yeah, and we don't want to live where we live.
Oh,
So
Natalie.
we feel we're stuck at the moment. We have 2 teenage daughters and a partner living with us as well, and obviously they're trying to save to get their deposits for their first houses.
Right.
So we don't want to increase their rent because then that's going to have a knock-on effect with their life. And we're privileged that we've got 2 cars, so we can possibly look at selling one of the cars, which is an option. But even down to my husband and I work full time.
Yeah.
We have a cleaner that comes in once a week just to help us out. I can't afford her anymore, and that's going to have a huge knock-on effect with her.
Of course it is.
And
See, there'll be
I'm
people saying,
dreading-
"Oh dear, poor Natalie, she can't have her cleaner anymore.
Exactly.
That's not struggling." But they're thick. These people are thick.
I don't care. I don't care of that.
But there's a cleaner there who's
her.
lost one of her main income
That's
streams.
right.
Maybe
I
they're
was
bright enough to
helping her.
understand why that's a big deal.
Exactly, that's it. But so we'll give up a car and we won't have holidays, and we're going to work out a budget of where we can save. We won't shop in certain supermarkets now, and we'll go to different supermarkets. And everything that we took for granted now, all the privileges that we had will be gone. And yes, you're right. Some of your other listeners will think, wow, she's been lucky to have that. But when you've had it and it's all of a sudden, it's a shock to the system.
Well, because your engagement with the system hasn't changed. You're still keeping your side of the bargain, as it were. You're still playing the game by the established rules. But Kwasi Kwarteng has come along and blown up the centre circle, hasn't he?
Completely. We're really shocked. Really shocked. So
And can you cover it? I mean, will you be okay? Is that?
I think we will be okay. We've worked out, what we will cut back on, and it's every penny of any surplus money that we had, and we're going to have to try and figure out maybe a little bit more.
Just to tread water, just to stay where you were before. That's the dispiriting. I mean, I know you know this. I don't want to lay it on to sort of thickly, but that's the really dispiriting thing, is that you make savings in order to do things, to do more than you were doing before. The idea of having to do all of this simply to stay where you are, simply to stay treading water is just depressing, isn't it? I imagine.
Yeah. We've managed to get a portable mortgage, so if things were to change within the next 2 years, and it may well be that it's better for us to actually pay a redemption penalty to come out of that mortgage if the rates drop, and all we can do is hope that the rates will drop.
And then you can be nimble, and you get resurrect the dreams, the house moving dreams that have been dashed by Kwasi Kwarteng. Do you feel that this is a price worth paying for all the growth that's on the horizon, Natalie? All the economic growth that has been promised to you? No,
not at all.
Are you a member of the anti-growth coalition, perhaps, down there in Chingford? I don't know. Is there an outer branch, the Chingford branch of the anti-growth coalition?
I'll definitely look into it, but I think my concern more is for the next generation that are trying to get on the property ladder.
Yeah.
They have no hope.
They really don't, do they? Because the starting, and I think Martin Lewis objected to something the actual Treasury had put out on Twitter, to the point where they deleted it because it was so utterly illiterate. It was numerically illiterate, if that's possible, like in pedantic semantic terms. Natalie, I wish you well. I wish there was something more helpful that I could say, but the part of the reason perhaps why this gets glossed over or people don't look at it is that everybody else who hasn't landed in this really unlucky period of mortgage renewal or moving is thinking, crikey, there we had a lucky escape, we dodged a bullet there, but for the grace of God go I. And then everybody who is in a less healthy financial situation, less lucky financially, is conditioned now to sort of sneer and snarl, and rather than saying, God, that sounds absolutely awful, I'd hate it if that happened to me, you will instead go, oh, so you're not going to have a foreign holiday, or you can't afford your cleaner anymore. And that is divide and rule. That's how they get away with all of the worst things, by encouraging us all to think that our neighbours are our enemies rather than our governments. And this is a direct consequence of government policy, to the point now where Britain's biggest lenders have called on Kwasi Kwarteng to intervene and extend a mortgage guarantee scheme. Otherwise, as Natalie just suggested, first-time buyers are going to be squeezed out of the market completely. 12:31 is the time. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:34 is the time. Real life tales of mortgages continue, and but before that, actually, let's talk to Stuart, because Stuart's a mortgage broker, so that could be quite interesting, finding out what's going on from inside the office of somebody who is presumably both extremely busy and not enjoying his work as much as usual. Stuart.
Yeah, let's just say it's been a crazy couple of weeks, really, to be honest.
Yeah,
definitely.
So, go on. Tell it however you want.
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is with this, a lot of the time, the problem in the sort of viewpoint the government have been putting forward on this, and certainly in interviews this week, has been a case of it's to do with the Bank of England. And that is the biggest misconception about what's been going on. Because in terms of before the speech, when it happened, in the lead up to that, the day before was when base rate was increased by 0.5% by the Bank of England. Okay. But in the week before that, the lenders had already started to price in that change. And they thought, in many cases, it was going to go up higher, maybe by 0.75.
Yes.
So in the week before the speech, the rates had already started to increase by lenders. After the speech, and when the money months, was when the chaos started. And from that point onwards, we're in a position now where a lot of the rates that the public are being offered are in the region of 1.5 to 2% higher than they were before his speech.
But because the speech was so catastrophic that there is an expectation that the bank will have to raise rates still further in order to undo the damage that the mini budget has done, and that's what the banks are factoring in. That's what the mortgage providers are factoring into their calculations and their projections.
What we've so far this year, though, there has been a trend upwards, as you know, with base rate during the course of the year. So at the start of the year, we could get a 5-year fixed rate for a client at 1.75.
Yeah, I know.
This week, similar client with a large deposit of 40%, 5.14. So that rise is inclusive of this additional boost that was given to it by the Chancellor.
Yeah.
The rate trend itself has been increasing, but it's been a bit of a more of a manageable one.
It's been incremental. It's been incremental.
Yeah.
It hasn't been. This is bombshell stuff, isn't it? I mean, and that pushes. Oh, we've spoken to a couple already. I'm sure you were listening, but this is the difference between being able to press ahead with a move and not being able to press ahead with a move. It's that simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a client this morning who was looking to buy a flat to let out, for example, and I know people have got different views on people who do that, but this is going to be part of a bigger issue that follows on, because their first inquiry with us was about a month ago, and they could get a 2-year fixed rate at 3.75. Today, if they were going ahead, which they're now not going ahead, be 6.23. Now, the impact, not only just for these transactions, so there's one seller who's not going to get a buyer off of that already. But next year onwards, when we've got situations where you've got buy-to-let landlords who are looking to refinance, a lot of the lenders now have already started to make changes to their stress testing interest rates. So normally, if you were a buy-to-let investor and you wanted to buy a property to let out, the lenders don't just check to make sure that the rental that's coming in per month covers the mortgage. They stress test it at a higher interest rate to make sure it does.
So, in other words, if it goes up, are these people still going to be good for it?
Exactly. So that range was normally in the region of 5.25% or 5.5%. One lender at the end of last week changed their stress testing level to 7.44. So
there's going to be hardly anybody left who can press ahead with deals like this.
Well, the problem is, you see, the knock-on effect is that if you've got a buy-to-let landlord who needs to refinance at the end of a deal...
I've got one on next. I've got one on the other line, would you believe?
They've got higher interest rates, but then on top of that, if they want to achieve refinancing in the future, who's going to pay? It's going to be the tenant, because they're going to pass on that cost.
And they won't be able to afford. They won't be able to afford that either. So what happens then? I mean, this is when you have a crash, is it? I don't want to use apocalyptic language, but how does this play out if things carry on like this? And it looks like they are going to carry on like this, because Kwasi Kwarteng apparently thinks he's played a blinder. Well,
the two main sort of key issues are, both for residential and for buy-to-let, is that existing lenders will always work with borrowers. So even if somebody can't remortgage, whether that's a home to live in or a let property, lenders will tend to have, not in all cases, but most of them will have options for interest rates for people to switch to with minimal underwriting on that basis. Okay, so that is like a fallback option. But one point on the issue that, with regards to what the Chancellor said, this is statistics from Money Facts, okay? So over the calendar year until his speech, mortgage products had reduced by 27% due to rate rises during the course of the year.
Yeah.
In the week after his actual speech went out, the available products on mortgages during that week fell by another 41%.
Yeah. I mean, it does beg a belief, doesn't it? And I mean, a quick word on first-time buyers. You've talked a lot about buy-to-let landlords and renewals, but first-time buyers they're just out of the game, aren't they, for the foreseeable?
It depends a lot on whether they. I mean, it's about balancing things out in terms of what their current circumstances are, because there's going to be scenarios there where they may all be in rented accommodation already, so the gap is going to be larger now than it may have been before in terms of the cost for them per month between a mortgage and their rent. So that's going to be down to individual circumstances. The only other thing I wanted to mention, actually, which is with regards the government's line with regards to the Bank of England being all-encompassing of what happens to interest rates. The important thing is the swap rates, because these money market swap rates are what the lenders use to price fixed-rate mortgages.
Yeah.
So the Bank of England base rate doesn't directly affect that in most cases. So that's where these costs have increased from. Because of the actual banks, it's costing them more money now to buy the money in, which is why we've seen rates being withdrawn. I mean, I had one lender contact me last Sunday saying we're pulling our rates now for tomorrow.
Oh.
And, for example, a year ago, we could say to a client, here's the best deal for you, and then they could go away and think about it for a week.
Think, yeah.
Now we're having to do disclaimers. It's basically saying that you need to act quickly, unfortunately, but we cannot guarantee that when you come back, this deal will still be there.
So grab it now with caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Exactly.
All of that.
Yeah.
Stuart, mate, thank you. So, I mean, it's pretty bleak, and it is. I mean, just very briefly, how do you process the fact that you've given us a neat explanation of how the government is trying to avoid responsibility rather disingenuously, but I'm just looking at one of the first polls that's dropped since Tory conference finished, and Labour are up to 32 points ahead on this voting intention poll. Conservatives steady on 20%. I don't know that they'll go much lower than 20%, but so it's not landing. I mean, people are just not persuaded. People have lost complete faith in this government, but they continue to insist that they're either blameless or that they're doing everything right. How do you process that personally, not professionally?
Well, I mean, on the personal level, all you can try and do, I mean, certainly if it's friends talking to me about it, I just try and say to them, try and explain the same sort of things, that what they're saying is not true.
That's such a scary conclusion, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to say to them that what they're saying about the Bank of England being all responsible for everything is not the case.
The reality they describe does not exist.
and the fact that they bang on about fiscal responsibility, it's like this is the biggest own goal they could ever do.
Yes.
And to pretend that they didn't have an input in this is the worst thing of all.
It's compounding the incompetence with calumny.
It just beggars belief, to be honest. And the thing is with it, the main thing is what people have got to do, above all else, if they've got a mortgage and their mortgage deal is up for review in the next 12 months, start 6 months before their rate is due to end.
Solid
it's very
advice.
Important.
Solid
Give them
advice.
time. Give themselves time.
Stuart, thank you, mate, and I appreciate that. I really do. A bit of professional insight. That figure just dropped while Stuart was talking. It's voting intention poll covered research done on the 6th of October, which is yesterday. Labour on 52%, the Conservatives on 20%, the Lib Dems on 8%, the Greens on 7%, and the SNP on 5%. That honeymoon period of Liz Truss's is... Yeah. Here is a little snippet, a little soupçon, a taster, if you prefer, of my full disclosure interview with probably the most significant broadcaster of the last 50 years, would you say? Apart from David Attenborough, which is a point David Dimbleby made himself at the beginning of our interview. We haven't mentioned the word impartial. I sense you never felt particularly restricted, but quite a lot of big BBC beasts emerge from their years of purdah and start either sort of insulting the corporation or addressing ancient grievances. There's none of that with you.
No, but that's impartiality about the BBC. I mean, I feel...
No, but also about, I don't think you... I mean, I'm not sure it works in the current climate of the both sidesism, getting people. For me, it was when I had to interview Pascal Lamy, the former Director General of the World Trade Organization. And then for balance on Newsnight, I had to interview Andrea Leadsom, who was going to tell us why Pascal Lamy was wrong about the World Trade Organization. That just felt wrong to me. But that was a very specific and particular.
Yeah, I think I'm not sympathetic to this argument of both sidism being wrong.
No.
Because, I mean, the example that's taken always is that there were, I think Emily Maitland says, 50 economists who wanted to remain in the EU, and we were always going to Patrick Minford in Cardiff, who was one of the only sort of senior economists who was in favour of leave. My view is there's a perfectly sensible way of dealing with that, which is that you say to the Patrick Minford figure, why are you the only economist we can find to talk about the advantages of leaving? And why are 50 economists saying that you're wrong? You know, what is it? What makes you think you're right and they're all wrong? That's the way to deal with it.
That would be bias, according to the Daily Mail.
Well, there wouldn't be. Well, I stuff the Daily Mail.
So you never felt.
I don't think this. I mean, I think the argument about how we handle Brexit, of course, it's always contentious.
Sure.
And any it's contentious.
The bigger the stakes, the more contentious the conversation.
How we report Liz Truss's speech at the conference or whatever, everything is. But I think that but simply to go on inquiring and investigating, I don't feel that is ever wrong, and having the alternate view there.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that moment. Do you remember? And when the Thatcher supporters always crow about when, what was it? 340 economists all wrote a long letter to the Times saying that Hayek was wrong, Thatcherism was wrong, and everything, and then actually. The economy picked up, So who knows?
It's not science, is it? Lots there. I mean, that's quite an unillustrative clip because there was quite a lot of me in there because obviously it's an area of particular interest for me. Funny, he says stuff. The Daily Mail report on something he said at a literary festival yesterday in what I think is a fairly disingenuous way, but happily everyone will be able to hear that interview instead to find out rather more. Permanent truths. David Dimbleby on Full Disclosure. Get it from Global Player app or wherever you download your podcasts. 12:50 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Do listen to that, David Dimbleby. I mean, for the record, and I did tell him this, I actually agree more with Emily Maitlis on that particular issue than I agree with him. But if his opinions and thoughts aren't worth listening to after that career, then nobody's are. It's a really riveting interview, he says, somewhat self-referentially. I was speaking to Stuart, the mortgage broker, who talked to us about private landlords who are coming to the end of their mortgage deals. And I said, oh, look, we've got one waiting on the other line. And we have. It's Paul in Ashford. Paul, what do you want to tell us?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah. What Stuart said was absolutely right. We've got a buy-to-let property. Didn't start out as a business or anything like that. It was just a property we inherited after death of a relative. So we thought we'd rent it out. Been renting it out for the last few years. But the buy-to-let mortgage is due to finish in about 4 months' time. So we've now started to look around. Look, maybe 2 months later than Stuart suggested. Yeah. But we've remortgaged before, so it's not been a problem. And the rates now are just unaffordable. We're looking at a monthly increase of over £500. Now, I understand people might have sympathy. Well, you've got a property. Well, it's not that. It's at the point now where even if we do pass the stress test, like Stuart was saying, I can't afford that money.
I think people just need to imagine it's their car. They might have two cars in the drive, and one of them they're currently making the payments on, and those payments are about to go up by £500 a month. What are you going to do?
And I can't put that increase onto the tenant because it's inherently unfair.
And they probably wouldn't be able to afford it anyway.
One, they probably wouldn't be able to afford it, but the other thing that the people don't realise is that amount going on a rental is also pushing that property past its rental threshold, what you can actually get for it. So the problem is we're then faced with an issue. Well, what do? I can't afford it. The tenant can't afford it. So I have no choice but to either try to absorb it or we have to evict the tenant. And we've been really lucky. We've had one tenant for 10 years. He pays on time. We do everything. We haven't even put the rent up. It's not a business. It's almost, of course we make a little bit of money out of it, but it's not huge. But what do we do? That tenant, through no fault of his own or my own, is going to have to be evicted unless we can find a way around it.
So that you can sell? Or so that
we can sell, because there's no way that we can afford everyone's struggling.
You need to get rid of the house.
Yes.
Then you're going to turn the tenant's life upside down, which is going to make you feel rotten.
Yep.
They've got a whole heap of problems starting then from scratch in a different direction, a different conversation. And there's no guarantee that you're going to find a buyer in the current climate anyway. Or at least not for...
prices are supposedly predicted to drop. I mean, I think the other thing that is going to impact a lot of small landlords like myself, whose deal is coming to an end, is that with also the proposal next year of the ending of the Section 21 eviction notice, the no-fault eviction, they're looking to do away with that.
Yeah.
Well, not everyone is a massive business with loads of properties. There are a lot of small landlords like myself inherited a property and have done it just for maybe potentially the equity in the property at the end of it.
Yeah.
But this will cause a lot of private landlords to make that decision now to get rid of the property, because it's going to be a massitive headache next year, and you've got the cost increases this year.
So
and how does that help?
No, it doesn't. So there's going to be a sort of, I don't quite want what the word would be. It's not an explosion, is it? But there's going to be an escalation. There's going to be a right old...
Yep. And the problem with that is because of you've got the cost of living crisis, which everybody's dealing with, that you are going to end up with way more homeless families. I mean, ours is a family that's been there.
And you can have empty properties potentially, and homeless families, or repossessions. Or mate, I'm so glad you rang in today, because people can be idiots if they want and talk about pour me a drink, or get the world's tiniest violin. This is about the country, the economy as a national issue. It's not about individual stories. Individual stories create a tapestry that allows us to understand what's going on a much bigger scale. And on a political scale, you are precisely the kind of person that Liz Truss claims she's actually looking after. So God knows the people that she doesn't care about. If the people that she claims that she's looking after are suffering like you're, or enduring what you're enduring, experiencing what you're experiencing, then what about, as you've reminded us, the actual tenants about whom she couldn't give a fig, it would seem. Thank you, Paul. Now, as you know, as you've heard throughout the programme today, one of the small charities that Globals Make Some Noise is supporting this year is Parenting Mental Health, which supports parents across the UK. They offer support skills. They offer support, skills, understanding and hope to parents supporting their child as they endure mental health problems. Now, I'm going to issue what we call a trigger warning now, because there is some quite traumatic audio coming up. This audio contains references to suicide and self-harm that some listeners may find upsetting. It's an illustration of how important the work that Parenting Mental Health does is. Joanne discovered Parenting Mental Health after her teenage daughter started to self-harm and indeed made a suicide attempt. She explains how much the charity has helped her and her family.
Lucy really started struggling at 15, and then we got a phone call from school to say that a child in her year group had died by suicide, and that led to her confiding in a teacher that she was thinking the same thing, so it was like a huge shock. She made a suicide attempt when she was at school. You just don't think your child will ever do that, ever. You think you'll know, and you feel such shame that you didn't realise it got so bad. But I think the thing that happened when she was at sixth form was almost worse than the suicide attempt. I heard a big scream from upstairs, and it was my elder daughter, and she'd gone into Lucy's room and she just shouted, "Mum, Mum," and the 13 steps up to the bedroom, and she'd shaved all her hair off in self-harm. Parenting Mental Health is a Facebook group. It's a group that supports parents of children who are struggling. I must have Googled it or searched it in some way. I must have. And I thought, I'll give it a week and then I'll just quietly leave. But by then, people were reaching out to me and saying, "Oh yeah, me too. I felt like that too, and this is what helped with my child." And you just felt like you were cocooned in such a supportive, compassionate space, really. The personal connection with the charity was so important because it was more like approaching a friend, really. It was the connection, because I'd kept Lucy's illness a secret. Suddenly you could say what you wanted to say and ask the questions that you could only ask people who'd been through the same thing. The funding from Global's Make Some Noise is going to make a huge difference to parenting mental health. When I joined the group, there's about 400 members, and now there's 30,000. Such a warm, compassionate space.
Everyone needs a warm, compassionate space, but imagine how much people like Joanne and Vix and Alison and Suzanne and everyone we've spoken to today involved with parenting mental health need it. You can help, you know you can, and you can help now. You can donate £10, £20 or £30 by texting LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30, no spaces, to 70766. That's LBC10, LBC20 or LBC30 without a space to 70766. 100% of your donation will go to Global's Make Some Noise. You need to be 16 and over to join in, and do seek the bill payer's permission. Standard network charges apply, and terms and conditions are at makesomenoise.com. Thank you in advance if you are thinking of doing that, and thank you in retrospect if you have done it already. I met 3 amazing women today and just heard from a 4th, and anything that we can do to help them help others would be a deed well done. Have a cracking weekend in the meantime. I'll be back with you on Monday. Here's Sheila Fogarty. On Monday, 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 here's Sheila Fogarty.